Right team, it's tomatoes. That's what we're doing today. It's all about tomatoes. This is a beautiful heritage variety. In the background you can see we've got an entire tower that has been growing all summer. It's a little bit of a monster and it needs a load of work. So I've got another tower over here, a home tower that we've basically had trained all the tomatoes. They're beautiful. I'm going to show you the difference between doing it the right way and the wrong way. It's going to be really interesting. So good. Right team, it's the end of the summer period, so this is the perfect time to be showing you how to properly look after your tomatoes. I say that with a load of sarcasm because realistically with tomatoes you need to be doing the work from when they first start. Now, before we go anywhere, we need to just understand that there are essentially two different types of tomatoes. There's determinate tomatoes and then there's indeterminate tomatoes. The difference being that the determinate are generally considerably smaller and they will grow to a specific size and that will be that, right? So you can also have dwarf varieties and whatever else, but determinate essentially are the tumbling types of tomatoes, the ones that you would put at the bottom of your tower and they would go down on either side. So there's determinate tomatoes and then there are the monsters, which are the indeterminate tomatoes, and they're by far the broader category. With those, you're talking about they will continue growing literally until the season essentially kills them off. So they will grow until autumn. When the weather turns, they will then get a number of different diseases and they will die of their own volition. So those are the two different types of tomatoes. Behind me you can see, or it's a little bit hairy, but behind me we have a tower garden home. And what we've done with this tower garden home is what I would recommend to everyone, and that is use that big old ball of beautiful free energy in the sky to then power your summer growing. So with that you're going to get far better yields, far better taste, you're going to have a lot bigger growth, and also you can do a much wider variety than you can indoors. Now don't get me wrong, with lights you can do most of it, but it takes considerably longer to then get the fruit that have carotenoids in them, so the red types of fruits, black fruits, whatever, to change colour. So tomatoes, being the key one that we're talking about, do so much better in sun, and therefore with this what I've done is I've bought the unit outside, I've taken the lights off, I've put the cap on the top, and then I've trained the tomatoes on either side of me. On this side, so behind, we've got a big cabin and people sit there for within the restaurant, and it's a great place to then have it so you're training it down one side and then down the other. So what I've done is my one on my left is quite well looked after. So when I say looked after, that's us then moving into what you have to do with a tomato plant. So tomato plants, the indeterminate varieties, will continue to grow and grow and grow. So what you really need to do is you need to train them so that they go up against a vine or some sort of backing that allows you to then allow them to continue to grow really strong, but have something to bear their weight. So that's the first thing you need to do, is as they grow, you basically tie them to whatever the backing you have. And then the second thing you need to do is you need to thin them out. And that is essentially making it such that you really only have one length. You can do it, actually that's not quite right. You can split a tomato plant so that you can take the top off and then two new nodes will grow out like this, and essentially then you can then tie them and have two trusses that go up. But really, in this case, what I've done is I've created just the one, and as the vine grows, you'll then have what are called suckers that come off at a 45-degree angle off the main plant. So you'll generally have a leaf that comes down, you'll have the main vine, and then in between that you will then have a sucker. And if you don't take the sucker off, then you do have an issue, in that what it's doing is essentially the plant is putting all of its energy into growing leaves and creating a very substantial bush. And what that doesn't do, therefore, is put the energy into creating really, really delicious tasting fruit. So that's probably the biggest thing you need to be doing, is you need to be removing the suckers. You need to continue to train it. And with those two things in place, as long as you've got decent sun on them, you're going to have an amazing tomato crop. So let's go and have a look at this one over here, and I'll show you what I mean in terms of suckers and the vines and stringing them up. Right team, so this is your perfect example of what I'm talking about. Now this tomato we have done a bit of work on. I'm going to show you one that we haven't and we've left to go to rack and ruin. It's so bushy it's ridiculous, but in this case you can see we've got one main vine that's coming down. Well, there's actually two, but the main vine that comes down here goes all the way up here, and on the end it's continuing to push out, and that will continue to go until you get to the point in the season, which essentially is now, where you nip the top off, right? You take the head off, and that will stop it from then continuing to grow out. It kind of loses its momentum. But in this case, let's now talk about suckers, which is a rather surreal name for what they are. But a sucker, you can see this vine here, and that vine essentially goes all the way down and up here. You can see this leaf that's come off, and there are lots of these leaves that come off at a 90-degree angle, right? So then you can see this thing here. Now I should have taken this off a way ago, right? So this has actually grown into something quite substantial, and that's what happens. You don't want this to be growing like this. You want to be taking it off. If you take it off, these beautiful fruit will suddenly, they'll get more energy put into them. They will be sweeter in their taste, or everything will go into producing the fruit and not all the leaves. So in this case, albeit when I look at this one, it has got a flower on it, I'm going to take that off. I'm going to nip it off right here. And then when I do that, again, this is all then going to grow really well. So let's do that, shall we? We're going to just get rid of some of this foliage because we want to have air movement in here. We're trying to push back the end of the season as far as we possibly can. And that means taking off foliage so that you can just get some air moving in there. Then we're going to be in a much better position. And I'm seeing suckers down here coming out. You can see that little chap down here. He's got to come off. Now, smaller suckers, actually, perfectly happy to just pinch it off if it's small. It's only when it gets big that you certainly want to use some proper secateurs, and you also want to just be trying to sterilize these relatively regularly. I'm not talking about anything other than just putting it in boiling water for a small period. So we're just going to open this plant up a bit, get some air moving, take that whole thing off. And actually what's really interesting, cameraman, can you bring the camera a little bit closer, because I'm looking at something here which is also quite useful for people to understand. I don't know whether you can see that. That is a broken stem. Now usually with a broken stem, your history, that's the end of that stem, and you basically take it off. But what's interesting is this is broken, God knows how, but it has broken, and essentially it's still providing energy to the rest of that part of the plant. It's what? Oh, it's called knuckled, okay. But as you can see in here, you've just got half a ton of foliage that can come off. You can be fairly militant at this time of the year. Right team, welcome to the beast, right? We've had 3 tomatoes growing on this tower. It's got a cage. It is a monstrous amount of foliage, and we've got 2 things going on with it. Actually, first off though, in the background here, we've got these amazing little black, well, they're a sort of purpley black chili. What, do you remember the name of them, Alex?
I think they're called dark opal.
So these are called dark opal chilies, and they're absolutely epic. Then we've got jalapenos, I think, growing up here. They may be actually Thai bird's eye. But then in amongst those, we have just about the most enormous tomato plant I've seen in a while. And the problem we've got with this is we've done no maintenance on it at all. We actually wanted to keep it like this to actually see how it would work in comparison with the home tower that you've seen. And you're immediately seeing that these fruits are considerably smaller than the ones over there. They are in nowhere near as good condition, and it's just a mess. Right, peeps, we've got to come down here to have a look at this, right? So what we're talking now is we're talking the killer of all tomato plants, and that is blight. I'm sure there's a highfalutin word for it, but that's essentially what it is known in the industry. And you can see with this, it's starting to move. So what happens is the leaves are starting to curl. They're starting to go a dark brown color. They almost feel crisp under the thing, and with the actual stem, it's going a dark color. All right, so unfortunately, this is the end of this entire plant. Now we've got a ton of tomatoes in here, and what can you do? Well, there are a number of things to do, and one of those things, which is, I mean, it's what people have been doing for hundreds of years, green tomato chutney. All right, so these are not wasted. They can go into a chutney, but essentially all the decent fruit is gone. But this is your perfect example. The home tower over there, it's got lots of air running through it. There's not any instance of blight on that one over there because we've cut it and we've pruned it and we've allowed that air to move in there. This one, it's going down. So I can't think of a better example. Right guys, I hope that was of use to you, because tomatoes are just such an epic thing to grow. I am a massive advocate, as I keep banging on about doing it outdoors. It makes a huge difference. If you can just get your home tower outdoors, you're going to be producing a bountiful amount, kilos, pounds, massive amount of tomatoes all year, all summer long. So in the comments, let me know if you've got any questions on anything to do with tomatoes, but I hope that was of use. I look forward to seeing you on the next.